Hello and welcome to episode 302 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, Chinese automaker BYD has revealed its Blade 2 battery. I'll explain why it's going to change the world as we know it. Much more than Blade 2, the movie, and without all the vampires.
Not so fast, James. Blade 2 is directed by Oscar winner Guillermo del Toro, so it was also world-changing. But anyway, a new battery factory has opened in Canada. The factory is so massive it will produce enough batteries to power all of Canada's electric Zambonis.
Vladimir Putin is bombing the electricity infrastructure in Ukraine, trying to break the will of the people. But renewables are hard to bomb. In fact, very hard to bomb. Why, it's like bombing a needle in a haystack.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has been making energy and mineral deals around the world. He just has to explain at every stop that he's not Justin Trudeau and he's not dating Katy Perry.
I am. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, I'm going to start off real quick here with the tweet of the week. This is from Michael Liebreich, the founder of Bloomberg New Energy Finance, tweeted this quote from author and environmentalist Bill McKibben, who's not on Twitter for reasons which are self-explanatory anymore. He says, sunlight travels 93 million miles to reach the Earth, none of them through the Strait of Hormuz. That's a sunburn. I call it a sunburn. It's a burn, but a sunburn. And it was raining the oil in Tehran, and there was an environmental warning. I complain about my oil refinery here, but at least it's not raining oil. It kind of is raining a little bit of stuff, though, because there is film on vehicles around here. Mm-hmm. So that's not good, but there was a warning about the air and civic water supply is acidic, and that's not good because that wrecks the pipes for generations to come. It could be completely corroding the pipes for generations. And oil prices almost doubled, briefly reaching $120 per barrel before going down based on whatever comes out of the president's senile mouth. Things fly up and down, stock markets fly up and down, and oil is currently, as we tape this down, well below $100, around the 80-something mark, I believe. So you have a cold. Yeah. I am sorry to hear.
Well, I think I caught it from you over Zoom. I think this is a thing, right? I think this has happened before.
You got to update your virus program, Brian. You just got to, you keep those things updated.
That's right. That's the problem.
Did you get it? Who did you get it from? Did you go out? Did you leave the house?
Everyone in my house has it, so,
Oh, no. It's a bad one, probably.
It's one of those things. But anyway, I'm going to talk a lot about Canada this week. Of course, you and I are based in Canada, but, we have a global audience, so we don't like to dwell too much on Canada just itself. But for whatever reason, there's a lot of Canadian news this week, and the biggest one, vaguely related to clean energy, the province of British Columbia, home to Vancouver, is going on permanent daylight saving time. They just switched their clocks ahead, and they are not switching them back. This is a thing that they voted on, I think, 6 years ago to do, but they were going to wait for the west coast of the United States to do the same thing.
I think Ontario did that too, the province of Ontario, which is much bigger population-wise and size, I think.
Yeah.
They were going to wait for New York State and Quebec?
Yeah,
I don't know. They're going to wait for the people they trade with to do the same. So that if they ever did it, we would do it, is kind of what the referendum said.
Yeah, and it does make more sense if everybody along the West Coast is on the same time. But 6 years passed, and I think at the moment it's like up to Congress in the U.S. to sort of finalize that or whatever. So BC got tired of waiting, and this is it. They're now on permanent daylight savings time, which, well, first of all, I just said it wrong. Everybody in these news stories always says it wrong. It's not daylight savings time. It's daylight saving time. And it's just one of those things that everybody always says it wrong. So that's just a pet peeve of mine. But you and I, we've been on permanent daylight saving time here in Saskatchewan since the 1960s. And it's the best. I had to live in Ontario for 9 or 10 years, and I had to change my clocks. And it just struck me as the stupidest thing ever. I hate changing clocks. It is sometimes mentioned as an energy thing, like, oh, well, if you change the clock so that people are more awake during the daylight, I don't know. It's all nonsense because here in Canada, we're far enough north that the winter days are short no matter what. Like, it's just pointless to try and move it one way or the other. And then in the summer, the days are super long. Like, it gets light at 4 a.m. It stays light until 10 or 11 p.m. sometimes at the height of the summer. So, changing it then makes no sense. So I've always been against this. And I think, the world is slowly moving towards not changing clocks.
There was a columnist here, Bob Hughes, well known in the 70s and 80s and 90s, that wanted to change it. He wanted to play golf at 11 p.m. in June.
Right.
He thought that would be the coolest thing. And I'm sure it would be, but not all of us play golf. And it's kind of surreal. But you know what? That is interesting that I was waiting for your tie to clean energy.
Yeah.
What it would be.
Yeah, because honestly, nobody really knows why we started doing this. There's always stories like, the farmers wanted it changed. It's all nonsense because you could just get up whenever you want. Like if it's too dark for you, get up an hour later. None of this makes any sense.
Yeah. The days get so short here in southern Canada that, in December around Christmas time, that you basically get up in dark and go to bed in dark.
Yeah.
Like my kid will go to school in the dark and come home when it's pretty dark, even though it's just high school.
Yeah.
And workers will stay even longer.
Yeah.
So
if it's a 9 to 5 job, you're generally dark when you leave, kind of dark when you get back. Yeah, switching it around never makes sense. And I've just been waiting years and years for this to actually happen. So it's finally happened in BC, and hopefully this has a cascading effect.
There are some drawbacks that I'm going to throw at you here. One is if you watch late night TV, I hate the 4 months where it's on at 10:30, like Saturday Night Live, late night talk shows here in North America, which I tend to try and watch a little bit of before I go to bed, but that's too late for me now.
Well,
so they start at 9:30.
Nobody else has that
great.
problem. We only have that problem because we get cable TV from elsewhere and they change their clocks and we don't. So yes, our TV schedules sometimes shift by an hour.
So those shows start at 11:30 at night in the Eastern time zone in North America, and we're getting them early as a benefit here, which we always have.
Yeah, but if everybody just stops changing their clocks, then, that'll go away.
And yeah, that will go away. But the other thing that I have a problem with is clocks, clock radios, watches, everything. Like my wife thought it was an hour different than it was since the time shades. And she just went, I got up now?
Yeah.
Like on the weekend, I could have slept for another hour.
Yeah.
And she just didn't realize it because things get buggered up.
A lot of our devices change automatically, even though we don't change our clocks here. I have one clock on the wall that gets the international time signal from Denver. So I only have one device.
Oh, I want one of those. I've always wanted one of those.
It's the best. So you never have to set your wall clock. But twice a year, it's at the wrong time because other people change their times and we don't.
I have something almost as good. I have an Alexa wall clock in the kitchen, which my wife loves.
Yeah.
Can't live without. When it gets broken or out of whack. So it hooks up to an Alexa video speaker, which hooks up to the internet, which has the correct time zone for us, which if you can figure out the correct time zone. Microsoft has a Saskatchewan time zone where we live, but I have to figure out if Mexico City is the right one, because we don't change. So you got to get that right. Yeah. And so it not only it'll also show you a graphical representation of your kitchen timers, which she loves, and it'll count down. And so that's always correct. That's as close as I come. But I've always wanted one of those atomic clocks that gets the time signal from Denver, which is about 12 hours drive from here. Brian, I have to admit something. I'm excited about this show.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly excited. And it's a fat one. It's going to be a big one. So I don't want to stick around too long, but I'm really excited to talk about the things that we're going to talk about on our show today because they are the best of what we talk about, and they are going to offer a lot of hope in this often dark time. Even with renewables, there's a lot of dark talk and news stories. But for a moment on the weekend, I was car shopping, just for a moment, because I was reading an electric story about a huge discount on Chevy Equinox EVs in the United States. And I thought, well, I've thought this before. Like, why do we get these big discounts? And I went to the Canada site for Chevrolet, and sure enough, there was 10 grand off.
Wow.
I thought, 10 grand? Holy cow. That's a lot of money. And then there's 5 grand now from the federal government, which just recently came into effect mere days ago. And there was another $1,200 for the Costco membership. And we sometimes have Costco memberships, so we would go get one.
Wow.
And so that added up to a lot, but it still only brought it down to $40,000.
Right.
Which is still too much because of the tariffs and the exchange rate. The Equinox is shocking $56,000, $58,000 starting in Canada.
Yeah. So, and these are Canadian prices. So 40,000 Canadian is maybe 32 US dollars.
Which would be great.
Which would be nice, but that's still a bit high.
So it's only $2,500 more than a gas Equinox in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're looking at a gas Equinox or sometimes other vehicles that are like that, you're crazy to buy that because you will save that on gas, I don't know, in months.
Yeah.
Like you was in a small SUV or medium SUV, you will save that money fast.
Yeah.
Especially. So the cheapest EVs in the United States of America right now, the Chevy Bolt at $28,900. The Leaf, which has more range, is $31,400. And the supposedly starting at that, I think they're going to have a cheaper one, but that they're indefinitely postponed, which is kind of a drag. The Fiat 500e is $32,400. The Kona Electric is $34,400. The BZ from Toyota, which is now just called the BZ or BZ if you're in Canada, it is $36,300, which isn't bad because that's a hefty vehicle. If you're looking for, pretty good size EV or SUV rather, then that's the thing. And the Ioniq 5 is a little bit more than that. And the Equinox's EV is $36,700 in the United States. But there's always discounts on that because Chevy likes to give discounts and they're making a lot of them. The Model 3 from Tesla is $38,300 in the States as we record this. But I was reading or watching one of the Alex on Autos reviews of the new Chevrolet Bolt, the 27 Bolt, which is now in dealerships. And even in where we live, there's one here we could go look at, my wife and I perhaps, but she wants to get away from Chevy because of reliability issues and because their dealership people aren't as nice as the Toyota people. So I would love to get into a Toyota, but we'll probably have to wait for a used one to come around. Anyway, if you start adding, all the bells and whistles to a lot of these base model cars that are American made, they kind of add up to a Tesla Model 3 price-wise. The Model 3 comes as self-driving and, the highway auto steer like autopilot. Yeah. That's an additional fund now, right? That's a fee per month.
Yeah, you have to subscribe now to the full self-driving, which is $99 a month. But, other than that, it's a very well-equipped car.
Right. It comes, there's no levels like you have to pay extra for heated seats or something. It comes with everything.
Yeah.
So when you compare apples to apples, you got to, have the full spec version of some of the other cars. And when you do that, it kind of gets similarly priced.
Yeah, and this goes back to the sort of more old-fashioned way of selling cars through dealerships is, there's always a base model that's super stripped down, but nobody wants it. So, you get into the dealership based on that super low price that you hear. But then by the time you're in the dealership, you're like, oh, well, maybe I do actually want some of these bells and whistles. And most people end up buying a higher trim.
So my old friend, Brad Patelis, he sent me a DM, and I'm going to share it on the show. It says, as my solar go-to, I have a question I've been pondering. Does a lot of pondering, Brad does.
Yeah.
In fact, that's pretty much all he does is ponder on his spare time. Since all the light we see from the moon is actually reflected sunlight on a clear night with a bright full moon, do solar panels register any charging? And I said, Brad, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to make you listen to our show. And he said, that was a clever marketing ploy. And yes, it was.
Getting listeners one at a time here on the Clean Energy.
One at a time from my friend pool, if I have to. The short answer is technically yes, but practically no. Now, while solar panels can indeed detect the photons reflected by the moon, the amount of energy they generate is so incredibly small, there's almost never enough to charge a system, if you will, or power anything useful. And here's a breakdown. The intensity gap of this is the most critical factor in the massive difference in the light intensity between the sun and the moon. The moon seems bright because there's no other light around. Sometimes it can seem very bright to look at, but it's really not casting that much light. It's 400,000 times dimmer than direct sunlight.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like that.
Yeah.
It seems like, it could be not quite that because everything's lit up and you can actually see with your eyes sometimes, especially in winter when there's snow on the ground around here. The energy density, direct sunlight provides about 1,000 watts per square meter, and the full moon only provides about 0.003 watts per square meter. So your inverter, we have an inverter for our solar panels that changes it into AC electricity for our home and the grid. And for that to wake up every night when the sun goes down, I hear clicking from my laundry room. That's the relays clicking on and off when there's enough power, not enough power.
Right.
It just turns it off, basically, because there's not enough electricity. And that's, right at sunset or right at twilight. And it's not enough to click those on because they require a minimum startup voltage, usually around 80 volts. So, and I don't think Brad thought this, but this could be another situation of people thinking, did engineers overlook this?
Mm-hmm.
Did the millions of engineers in the world just, come up with this that I thought of that, they didn't? That never happens. Okay, people, that never happens. So don't think that you know something that hasn't been thought of, because that's just never the case.
I'm pretty sure I talked about this years ago on the show. I've had my solar panels since before we started the podcast. But I did check one night when the moon was very bright, and I probably talked about this on the podcast. I could go down to the inverter and sort of turn on the display, and I could tell that it was registering something from the moonlight.
Oh, that's cool. I don't think you have talked about that on the show.
I don't know. I thought I did. It's been 6 years now. We can't remember everything we've talked about on the show.
No, we certainly can't. I can't remember last week, but that's beside the point.
But yeah, not enough, again, to flip the switch and actually put, actual power in, but it was enough that it was like 0.001 watts or something. I could see it sort of flicking up and down on the display of the inverter.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool to see I was thinking future solar panels might be a little more sensitive, might be better, but they'll never be good enough to do anything meaningful with moonlight.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you'd get a watt out of it or something like that, but,
Yeah. I wonder if it would power a calculator. Just a thought. The solar power calculator.
There you go, the old Texas Instruments solar calculator. All right, so massive battery factory opening up in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and there's reports from CTV and CBC News. This is a big deal just because of all of the geopolitics that have been going on between Canada and the U.S. We don't get along with our neighbors so much as we used to, and the auto industry has been a big part of this. The whole auto industry is very much in that Detroit-Windsor corridor. Detroit on one side of the border and Windsor here in Canada on the other side of the border. And lots of sharing of parts and cars and everything being made by many different car companies across the border. Of course, the focus of this is changing because the U.S. is trying to get all of their auto production just back into the U.S. But this is a sign of how Canada is diversifying, and it's into a battery plant. And we probably talked about this 4 years ago when it was announced. Again, hard to remember everything we've talked about, but this is Nexstar Energy, and it is a massive, massive battery plant here in Canada. It cost about $5 billion. It's 4.2 million square feet. This is a huge, huge factory. And after 4 years, it's now producing cells. They've already produced 1 million battery cells. These are smaller cylindrical cells that could go into car batteries or grid storage batteries. And so, it's after 4 years, it is running. They've hired 1,300 workers so far. They have promised as many as 2,500 could be hired. And this is hopefully a lot of the workers from the auto industry that is, losing some of the jobs that traditionally happened here. So Doug Ford was one of the government officials there to cut the ribbon. He's the premier of Ontario, and he hasn't been the best guy in terms of like a clean energy track record. That's not necessarily his forte, but the government of Ontario and the government of Canada both put a bunch of money into this $5 billion project. So he was there, but it was funny because there's several people cutting the ribbon, and he couldn't get through the ribbon with his scissors. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, he was the guy who put stickers on gas pumps saying you're paying a carbon price on this tax when we had a carbon price, but now we don't. So.
Yeah, and when he first came to power, didn't he cancel a bunch of wind projects and stuff?
Sure, he did, which was really smart, Doug. So production began in November of this year, just past November. So they're already making over 1 million battery cells, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then they cut the ribbon after they made 1 million battery cells?
Yeah, well, they wanted to get through a trial production period, I think. And also, everybody's schedules have to light up to meet there and cut the ribbon. But
get the scissor day done.
Yeah, but it's nice to hear that things are well underway, that it's, this is actually working. It's not just still in the test phase. They're making serious numbers of batteries. Of course, Stellantis was a partner in this originally. Stellantis, the U.S. car company, Chrysler.
Yeah.
Fiat Chrysler. But they just very recently, in the last couple of months, sold their stake in it to LG. And again, this likely has to do with the ongoing shifts in the auto industry. 4 years ago, Stellantis was looking to probably increase their partnerships with Canadian factories in making cars. Now, 4 years later, they're not so much interested in that, so they sold their stake to LG. The initial plan was to make more car batteries was the goal, but there sounds like they're going to focus more on grid storage batteries. Again, possibly because, Stellantis is not part of that deal anymore. But, as we talk about all the time, there's insatiable demand for batteries, so I'm sure they will find customers.
Yeah, grid batteries are often the same or similar to car batteries. They can be. They can also be versions that are less energy dense, that don't have to fit into a car and not weigh too much, so they're just there. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show as well, but LG is the third largest battery maker in the world. There's CATL from China, which is the world's largest. Second is the automaker and battery maker BYD, which I'm going to talk about in 3 seconds. And then there's LG, who makes my washing machine as well.
Yeah.
And they are now involved in this. And it seems like it doesn't matter. You talk about this like, we're going to have a customer for this product.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't have to worry. There's just so much demand for it. We just start making batteries and we'll find the customers because there's just not enough to go around. Well, there is, but, there's just such a need for them. But the thing is, it's not going to be the latest battery tech, but it could be if they license it.
Yeah. And what is the latest battery tech, James?
I'm glad you asked, Brian, because as promised in weeks past, we've been hinting at this coming. BYD had their big tech day where they announced their Blade Battery 2, the second generation of Blade batteries. The first, to my surprise, actually goes all the way back to 2020. So it's been around for a while.
Ancient history.
I'll have a story in the lightning round about how safe those batteries are, because there was a fire that wasn't caused by the battery, and the battery did not have any problems at all, did not ignite, did not overheat. So that's a really interesting story. So yeah, this is Thursday of last week. They released their second generation battery, and they are prismatic cells that are extremely long and resemble the blade of a sword. You don't need to know that, but it's just the way that the cells are packaged. They're all put together in rows in cars, and then that's sealed up, and that's how that works, usually in the bottom of the car. BYD installs these cells in a wide range of sizes, from the small electric Dolphin Surf to large buses. That's the first generation of batteries.
Mm-hmm.
But this new generation, Brian, it only takes 5 minutes to charge from 10 to 70%. Now, there's a few stats here that you should all sit down for if you haven't been paying attention. I think most of you have, but it is mind-blowing to me. We knew this was coming. We all knew the trajectory of this, so this is not surprising. But it's a happy news that it is here for one maker of batteries. 5 minutes to charge from 10 to 70%. So why is that important? In a car, you don't usually let your battery drain below 10%. I do. Sometimes I'll go down to 6% because I have really good software that tells me I don't have any range anxiety when I'm on the highway. Yeah. 70%, usually you stop charging some cars at 70 or 80% because they charge slower after that. Yeah. So it's diminishing returns. You don't bother doing that. This battery, though, is different. And it can charge from 10 to 97%, which is a stat you do not see in car batteries. You do not see automakers do that.
Yeah, they always say like 10 to 80% or 20 to 80% because it's always slow after 80%.
This one goes to 97. Why 97? Well, the CEO of the company said because you want to leave a little bit of room for regenerative braking. That's when you hit your brakes and it charges up the battery.
Yeah.
We're just going to go to 97 so you have a little bit of room for that. It wouldn't make any sense, especially with the ranges of some of these, over 1,000 kilometers. Yeah. These cars that they're going into, it's insane. So, but here's the thing that you and I, because we live in the prairies of Canada, which gets very cold, we always say that, but it affects our cars. Yeah. Part of it is from cabin heating. You have to use the battery to heat the cabin. You're not just using waste friction heat from a gasoline engine. But also the batteries have less capacity in cold weather. We all know that. And sometimes you have to heat those batteries. But at minus 30 degrees Celsius, it only takes 3 extra minutes to charge from 10 to 97%.
Wow.
So 12 minutes in minus 30. And this is not a heated battery at minus 30.
Yeah.
This is a battery sitting there at minus 30 degrees for 24 hours. It's just sitting at that temperature. The whole battery has achieved that temperature. And it charges that quickly. So that is one of the biggest. I mean, not everybody in the world obviously lives where it gets cold or cool even to affect batteries, but room temperature is the best temperature for batteries usually. So this means we're not going to get these batteries right away, but this means that, the excuses are over. If somebody comes up to me and says, and they do all the time, I can say, well, BYD is putting these into 10 models of cars this year, right now. That's why people stopped buying BYD cars in China for the first couple months of the year, because they knew this was coming. There's been lots of hints of it. There's been pre-announcements. So they were wise to do that. Now, that takes a lot of charging speed that we don't have here, but there's some interesting stuff about that. This isn't, by the way, golf carts they're charging. It's 1,000-kilometer range. It's not my Bolt, which is 400 kilometers. This is like 2.5 times that in 12 minutes and minus 30.
Yeah.
Like, if that doesn't tell you where we're going in the world with renewables and electrified transportation, you really need to pay more attention. And this is not fake news.
Yeah.
This is real. This is BYD, CATL, these companies, they do not fool around. When they make an announcement, it's real, and it usually means they're about to be commercialized, and they are. They're going into 10 vehicles. Not the cheapest vehicles, but there are patents on those cheap vehicles filed for putting the Blade battery in those vehicles, Blade 2 battery. So we could see these vehicles, and I'm going to have a hot take on that later. So 10 models, BYD chairman Wang Xuanfu explained at launch event that stopping the charge at 97% was deliberate because it's an energy saving measure because of the regenerative braking that everybody brakes. Yeah. You can't go anywhere without braking.
No, and when I do charge my car up to 100%, yes, you can tell when you're driving it, the regenerative braking is not available and the car has to apply the regular brakes.
But wait, there's more. It has 5% improvement of energy density, which means it stores more energy in the same volume and weight as it did before. So you could theoretically have a smaller battery or a longer range in a vehicle. It's good for batteries to have more energy density, and that's a big challenge. So these batteries also improve on that. It's not huge, but it does make a big difference. So the lifespan and warranty, BYD has increased the guaranteed capacity retention by 2.5% and promised, Brian, a lifetime warranty on the battery cells.
Wow.
A lifetime warranty.
Wow.
Right now, North America, you buy a car, it's 8 years, okay? And they'll guarantee a capacity. Now, I couldn't find out what their capacity guarantee is, but they increased it by 2.5% on these cells because that's how good they are, that they believe in them. So a lifetime warranty, I mean, range anxiety and charging anxiety, like, will I find a charger? Will it work? Will it be fast enough? Is a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay. People have that with this new technology. But battery anxiety is real too, because a lot of prospective owners will be told, like, I've seen news stories like in recent weeks that said, you have to replace the battery. That's a problem, right? And
yes,
it's not true, though.
It's the other thing that people often ask of you and me when they see us on the street. It's like, well, my laptop battery only lasts 3 years. Why would I get a car with a battery? And lifetime warranty, that's a huge deal.
So this battery anxiety erases that. It's gone. And furthermore, if you're comparing apples to oranges, the combustion vehicles, you don't have a lifetime warranty on your engine.
Yeah.
You don't. That doesn't never existed, never will exist. But this is a lifetime warranty on the most expensive and important part of these battery electric cars. But wait, there's more. In a thermal runaway test, it successfully endured the simultaneous short-circuiting of 4 cells without the battery pack catching fire or exploding. So they purposely short-circuited a few cells and said, okay, if there was a defect or something, there was no fire, no explosion. And here's my favorite thing, Brian, about the new battery that you may not have heard, our listeners or you. High-speed flash chargers, which will use batteries to buffer the huge grid connections for megawatt plus charging, aren't here in North America, right? BYD is putting a whole bunch of these up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They're putting tens of thousands of them up this year.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because they're giving free charging for 1 year of these mega fast chargers. Yeah. This is 1.5 megawatts. So, I charge my old Bolt at 50 kilowatts. This is 15,000 kilowatts. No, sorry, 1,500 kilowatts. Yeah. This is at 1,500 kilowatts, which is really fast. You know, it would take a grid connection, and usually you would expect to pay, but they're getting free 1 year availability of these, and they're putting them up everywhere. Yeah. But here's the thing, though. I mean, should they come to North America, and God, I hope they do, you know, maybe BYD doesn't put up tens of thousands of megawatt chargers here, but these batteries have a killer charging curve on old school chargers. See, the reason that they can go high speed to 97% so fast means they can also have a charging curve that is not a curve. It's not even a charging curve to talk about. It goes full blast the whole way. It's a straight line.
Yeah.
Right now, if I have a car and I'm charging it on a fast charger on the highway at even 50 kilowatts, or if somebody might be doing 300 in a Tesla or 280 in a Tesla, you have to ramp up, you know, and get to like 10, 15, 20%, and then it goes hard, and then it falls off as early as 50% really fast. It starts slowing down so you don't wreck the battery, so you don't overheat the battery, so you don't damage the battery. But these batteries work fine without degradation at high temperatures.
Yeah. So most chargers around here are, say, 250 kilowatts, and you can plug in and it'll stay at that 250 kilowatts, which is not currently a normal
thing. Which means it'll charge a lot faster than you would expect on that charger. If you have a Tesla next to it and with the same size battery, this one could charge twice as fast, theoretically, if the charging curve stays that high. So we don't need to have those impossibly fast chargers. Hopefully we'll get them one day for people who do need to charge in the time it takes to fill a tank of gas or to swap a battery. So that's something I'm excited about. And you didn't hear, I only found one reference to that.
Yeah.
So that is, you may not have heard that, and that is a really good thing. So and that means 30 to 50% faster than other models. 30 to 50% faster because of the battery, even on a slower charger that may not be these 1.5 megawatt chargers. It might be the ones you just spoke of. And like I said, 10 vehicles are getting it. The Yuang U7 equipped with a 150 kilowatt battery pack, which is huge. It's truck size usually, but it achieves a pure electric range of 1,006 kilometers on the Chinese system, which is probably is generous, obviously, but that's still a lot of range. And the full electric Denza Z9 GT boasts a range of up to 1,036 kilometers. And here's another thing. You suggest a charging site to them. Say you own a gas station and say, I'd like some chargers. They'll get back to you within a week and start working on it. That's their promise.
Wow.
That's China. That's what China is doing right now. And it's just a system. What's going on there is unbelievable. Like it's incredibly not something that we're going to get here, at least overnight. It seems, very unlikely that that's going to happen here. The company confirmed that it already had completed 4,239 of these charging stations in the first 2 months of this year.
Wow.
With a commissioning scheduled for Friday where they're turning them all on. And they plan to build 20,000 more of these in China, these ultra-fast 1.5 megawatt chargers that you might expect for a semi-truck, but these are for cars. Yeah. So semis could use them too. Now, what does this mean for semi-trucks and large trucks? I would imagine that's going to be some future announcements, which is going to change the game for that.
Yeah, blade batteries in a semi would be amazing at those kind of charge rates.
So BYD has developed a plug-and-play concept for this purpose. The flash chargers that they're calling them are installed as a station within a station. BYD uses the existing fast charging network that's already there across China and may not have a 1.5, megawatt grid connection, but they're using batteries, their own storage systems on site, which don't take up a lot of room to buffer. So they charge relatively slowly, but then they disperse at this very fast rate because the people aren't charging. You don't want to have that powerful a grid connection for a charging station that only charges 5 cars an hour or something, like it's not that system. So they put in the batteries, which they can make themselves because they can. And I have a hot take here, Brian. So sit down for this hot take. This might be reason why some people go in Canada after BYD vehicles, because they're cold weather.
Yeah.
Canada's cold. A lot of these vehicles will be sold on the West Coast, which is like the U.S. Northeast. It's not that cold there. It doesn't make a huge difference, but sometimes it gets cool and they lose range, and people don't like that. They freak out there just like they freak out here in the prairies where it's minus 40. They also might choose them for their lifetime warranties. If you're looking at a BYD in Canada, and maybe it's like almost the same price as a Tesla Model 3, same car, same sort of format of car, this might be a reason to go with BYD. And, even if they're not cheaper, they've got these cold weather batteries, the lifetime warranty, and the charging speed now is going to be faster, and in the future, potentially way faster. Yeah, and that's pretty much, we're talking about battery swapping, where this sort of like an oil change facility will mechanically, automatically take out your battery, put a new one in, which is a great idea, I think. But this kind of matches that speed, because that's about 4 minutes and this is 5 minutes.
Well, and it's important to point out, too, that the faster your charging is, the less time you have to spend at the station, which means the more cars that they can serve.
Yes.
Like, if every car had to stay parked for 40 minutes to charge, well, guess what? You're not utilizing your charging station very well. But if people are zipping in and out in 5 or 10 minutes, the number of cars you can serve, it's insane.
And there's more, because BYD claims that the charging rates will not be more than the surrounding DC fast chargers that are already at these locations. So they're not going to charge a premium because they're not changing the grid connection. They're just adding batteries, which pay for themselves over time. That's a big deal, because you would expect, 1.5, sure, but I'm not going to pay twice of what gas is so that I can do that. Well, they're keeping it the same. And I would assume that they would do that in North America.
Yeah, and they're aggressively looking for market share. So, they're willing to do things cheaper in order to get market share.
So they estimate, you were just talking about this, that 10 times as many vehicles will be charged per day because they charge faster.
Yeah.
So, lineups are sometimes a thing, especially during holidays in China and holidays in North America. Sometimes you find, a backlog, and that freaks people out.
Yep.
People don't, if you go to a gas station, there's a big lineup. That's not comfortable. It does happen, though. It happens at Costco every day for some reason when I drive by it. Here, the storage batteries add some cost, but BYD figures that the increased utilization of each utility connection and reducing copper consumption pays for itself quite easily. And this could be the start of the next generation of EVs and charging, and it removes a lot of the usual excuses for sticking with gas cars. EVs are becoming more convenient, cheaper to run, quicker to refuel, more powerful, and smoother to drive. And once people get used to the technology, it just becomes normal car choice. Like, there's nothing in the way anymore.
Yeah.
This is it. Now, when will it get here? When will it get to Europe? When will it get to Africa and South America? I don't know. That's up to BYD, and we'll cover that in future shows. But China is already building that full EV ecosystem, and other countries may take longer to catch up. But if the experience keeps improving, it's hard to see why anyone would want to keep burning fossil fuels in cars, because it just seems like nonsense, like a poor decision to make.
Yeah, no, that's a huge, huge update from BYD. All right, this is sort of further to what I was talking about previously. Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he's on a big tour around the world. Do you think people are disappointed when he gets there and there's no Katy Perry, that he's, it's not Justin Trudeau? And
oh, yeah, it's that other guy who's dating Katy Perry. I don't know. Katy Perry's not as big as she used to be, Brian. And she's not that huge anymore with the kids.
But anyway, so yeah, Canada's Prime Minister is Mark Carney, and he's been traveling around the world signing various sort of energy and critical mineral deals. The story is from Reuters. Of course, again, he's working hard to engage the other middle powers, as he has called them, because we do not get along with our neighbors anymore here in North America. So there is now this G7 Critical Minerals Production Alliance, which is a thing that Canada started off, and it's an initiative to diversify and secure the global critical minerals production and supply, and diversify away from China, so we're not solely dependent on China. And so Mark Carney was in Australia, and Australia has agreed to become a part of this alliance. The initial agreements were signed last year for this Critical Minerals Alliance, and they've just sort of been further strengthened. Canada and Australia together produce about 1/3 of the global lithium and uranium, as well as more than 40% of the global iron ore. So those are pretty significant things that Canada and Australia have to offer. And so, yeah, further cooperation amongst the middle powers is kind of the idea with this. And then further to that, Mark Carney also went to India, and he signed a deal to advance the development of solar, wind, and hydrogen power. So there was a series of agreements signed, including a strategic energy partnership with India. Canada committed to joining the India-led International Solar Alliance, which is an organization dedicated to building solar capacity, and all the other G7 countries are a part of this. India, as we know from listening to this show, is that they are moving heavily on renewable energy. The country's Ministry of New and Renewable Energy says that they're now producing 271 gigawatts of power from renewables as of this month in India. And they're now just gotten to more than half of their power supply is now renewables in India. And this is 5 years ahead of what their target was for that. So certainly things that Canada could learn from India with their massive and quick solar deployment. So yeah, yet another big deal.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by how the United States is thinking about this too, considering the administration is poo-pooing solar and wind and EVs.
Yeah.
They're still looking at critical minerals, and not just for chips, processing chips for AI, but they know that they need it for their energy system, in spite of the fact that they say that let's burn coal as far because coal's fine.
I mean, they can always say one thing and then, end up doing the other. Nobody ever stops a politician from doing that. But
that's for sure.
And then there's one kind of final Canadian update here. This is not a huge deal because it's just a memorandum of understanding, but we've talked about it on the show before that the grid here in Canada is pretty clean. First of all, that's a good thing. Lots of, renewables on our grid already. But for whatever reason, our grid connections with other jurisdictions tend to flow more north-south than east-west. We are often sharing power with the United States, and the United States often sharing power with us. But for whatever reason, doesn't flow as easily east-west across Canada. So all of the different provinces and territories got together and signed a memorandum of understanding to better share power across provinces here in Canada, which we know is part of the solution in terms of clean energy. The more we can flow energy between jurisdictions, the easier it will be to have a clean grid.
Right. If it's cloudy one place, maybe 150 kilometers away, it's sunny, or 500 or 800 kilometers away, it's sunny. If it's windy in one place, so that all balance things out. Usually that happens. Like it's not always windy in one place, but usually it's windy somewhere because there's always fronts moving through. That's the idea about it. And yeah, even if longer connections, sun goes down in one place, it's still up in another. There's still talk about connecting Canada in North America to Britain via an undersea cable. And, I find that really interesting because somebody went to them, the cable makers, and said, is this possible? They said, yep, we'll just need more cable. And we'll have to tie them together, every 200 kilometers or something, but, and have multiple ships. But yeah, possible. So sunny in North America? Yeah. It's just something's completely different continent-wise. I don't know if they'll ever do that, but yeah, because, the geopolitics, if you cut that off, it would be a bad thing, but it'd be a high-voltage DC cable underwater.
And the grid just has to keep getting smarter, and adding more batteries to the grid can help with that, because batteries can shift their power supplies, more quickly than other sources. So yeah, just further grid smartening up is in the cards for everybody.
So a year or two ago on our province next door, Alberta, they were having some natural gas problems with their electricity generations. They had some that were offline for repairs and some that were not working in the cold weather. And there was a big panic about electricity. Please reduce your load. And we sent a little bit of electricity to them and bragged about it. And said, well, this is because all your wind power, the wind doesn't work. It's minus 30 and it's not windy. Well, ironically, what little wind power we had actually did go to them.
Yeah.
They did. Politicians don't like to admit that around here for some reason. But the connections are small. And next door, Manitoba is almost all hydropower, legacy hydropower. And we have no good grid connections to them. And we should be sharing, because you could store that hydro for now as a battery and, power up some excess solar, because there's always excess with renewables when it goes well. There's usually an excess once you have enough of them. We're far away from that. Brian, Ukraine is being attacked by Russia. They celebrated 4 years of beating up on Ukraine recently, which sucks, and it makes us all very angry. Of course, Russia's laughing right now because they're getting lots of money for their war machine from high oil prices. So that's a negative thing. And, who knows how much they could have manipulated Trump into attacking Iran, but that's another story. So Ukraine is getting their power generating facilities bombed on a regular basis because they want to destroy the will of the people so that they'll say, okay, let's surrender, let's give up half our territory or whatever they want to do. They want to break the will of the people by freezing them. So they do that as soon as cold weather comes, they go after the power plants. But as we talked about on the show before, there is renewables going up in Ukraine, and it's quite remarkable how much is actually going up considering they're in the full-fledged war with a giant neighbor next to them. Ukraine installed at least 1.5 gigawatts of new solar energy last year. That is a lot. Because remember, the population isn't huge in Ukraine. It's a smaller country compared to some, but that's enough to power 1.1 million homes. So that's a lot of power from just solar being installed last year. The country has 7 gigawatts of wind power in the pipeline and could more than triple its current wind capacity if they do that. Battery storage projects that take 2 years in Europe are completed in 6 months in Ukraine because urgency.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there is a way to do these things fast. There's less red tape. We got to get this up so people don't freeze to death. Since the invasion began, Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's energy system, and by the winter of 25-26, about half the country's power infrastructure have been damaged or destroyed, with total losses in the sector estimated to be about $56 billion. Ukraine's response has been to rethink how its grid is built. Instead of relying on big centralized power plants, they're moving towards decentralized renewable energy. Nuclear and coal are these huge generating stations that are centralized, and then you send all the wires out everywhere else from there. But if you and I put solar panels on our roof, that's a form of distributed energy. And so are, a little wind farm here, a solar farm there, that's distributed. It's not all in one place usually, although there is some mind-blowing solar projects going up in the world that are just massive, but that's another story. A coal plant is one big target. One missile can take it offline. One missile can take a coal plant offline. So that's a lot of energy for a million people, perhaps, or even more. Doing the same level of damage to a wind farm would take dozens of strikes.
Yeah.
They've studied this. They've studied it. So one wind farm would take dozens of strikes, and there could be many scattered wind farms around, distributed around. And Jeff Oldham at Ukraine's largest private energy company, D-Tech, says it could take around 40 missiles to the same damage you get from hitting a single large power plant. So power-wise, to knock the same power offline, you'd need 40 missiles, and it'd have to be accurate. Solar is similar. The panels are spread out, so attacking them just isn't very efficient if your goal is to cripple the grid. The country's grid operators plan to nearly double renewable energy production over the next 4 years. So we've heard of different things like, this war has propelled renewables in Europe because Russia, they cut off the gas.
Yeah.
So renewables take off in Europe. Well, this is like a country getting attacked going to renewables. This is one of the many reasons one of the many solutions that renewables has for problems. And one is getting attacked by a country, the giant next to you. Households, businesses, and public institutions have been installing rooftop solar systems at a rapid pace. Even during this war, Ukraine's energy company Yasno says customers are buying solar plus battery packages as fast as they can install them.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. A solar and a battery means you don't need a grid connection. You can still power your home, at least for part of the day. On very sunny days, the country even ends up with temporary power surpluses. That's how much solar they already have. Yeah. So you can see how this works in practice in the city of Mykolaiv, about 60 kilometers from the front line. 60 kilometers is practically a stone's throw. Not literally, but it's awfully close to the front line. A real rehabilitation center there installed 26 rooftop solar panels, along with 100 kilowatt hours of battery storage. That's like 2/3 of one of these Chinese cars we were talking about. That system kept the facility running through a 32-hour shelling period in mid-December when the power was out. The center treats about 70 patients a day, and during outages, it also opens its doors to local residents who don't have heat. So instead of freezing to death, they're going to a heat shelter. The University of Technology Sydney A study from them shows that Ukraine could meet 91% of its energy needs with a combination of solar and onshore wind, using about just 1% of its land. 65 miles or 100 kilometers from the war front, DTEC is building a 500 megawatt wind farm, and it is the first wind farm ever built in a war zone. It's been going on for a while. We've talked about it. When completed, it will supply 900,000 households with electricity. Other cities are experimenting with microgrids, smaller local systems that can keep running even if the main grid goes down. In Vinnytsia, there are 5 microgrid projects that are combining actually solar, gas, and hydroelectric power and battery storage. So you got a mixture of different kinds of electricity generation there and some storage of batteries. And 5 large wind farms are expected to join the system within the next couple of years. Another national university there runs its own microgrid with about 4.4 megawatts of capacity, using a mix of solar panels, natural gas, and diesel generators, and gas boilers. Some cities are going even further. One west of Kiev has set a goal of running entirely on renewable energy by 2050. And at the national level, the Ukraine's grid operator has also been investing heavily in battery storage. In 2024 and 25 alone, they added about half a gigawatt of battery storage capacity, which is nearly a quarter of Germany's total storage capacity. So Germany's a big country, population-wise and land size, and that's pretty significant to compare those two. So because the country is working under wartime conditions, projects move incredibly fast. So it's just incredible, when people cut off oil to your country, you go with renewables. When you have to pay lots of money for gas to come into your African nation, you ban gas cars. And these things, it's happening all over the place now. So battery systems that might take 2 years to build in Europe are being completed in 6 months in Ukraine because there's a war.
Yeah, that's great to hear. All right, if you want to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
And we are made possible by you guys who support us on Patreon. I want to thank everyone who's doing that. You can join us on Patreon for as little as nothing or $1 a month to start giving us money. That helps us and makes the podcast possible. Patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And coming up next, of course, is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
The Netherlands set a record in 2025, generating 132 billion kilowatt hours of electricity. That's up 10% from the year before. And renewables supplying 49% of output and exports, rising 25% to 30 billion kilowatt hours. That's right, Brian. The Netherlands, that northern cloudy country, that is the same as where we are, except cloudy. Where we are sunny, it's just, I don't know. Just Saskatchewan, where we live, we're about to begin educating high school kids about the benefits of coal generation. That's the difference. One is in the future, one is in the past. Nokian has debuted a giant step forward in their studded tire engineering. I thought you would like this story, Brian, because you're a studded tire man.
I'm into them.
A studded tire, winter tire that automatically adjusts to changes in temperature and surface pressure. The studs retract, Brian.
What?
They retract when it gets warmer.
How do they do that?
I don't know. But there's a story in Ars Technica called "These New Winter Tires Have Studs That Retract as It Warms Up." It's just like a James Bond vehicle.
Wow, I'm going to have to look that up because I do like
You will have to look that
studded tires, and we have them on one of our cars. But for my other one, I opted not to get the studded tires because they are noisy. Like if you're on just normal pavement, I don't.
But what if they retract?
But what if they retracted? That would be amazing.
So if you are from a warm climate, and God bless you if you are, studded tires are little metal spikes that come out of the rubber that dig into the ice to give you extra traction. But if the ice isn't there, warms up, or it's dry, you click, click, clink on the asphalt and it's louder. You don't like that. Winter tires are always a bit louder. Anyway, but studded are, really loud. So a German car expert says that Europe is 20 years behind China on EV batteries. According to Ferdinand Dudenhofer, battery production costs in China are 30% lower than those in Europe, with development cycles 50% faster. And we just talked about one of those developments.
Yeah, I mean, we do have this massive battery factory that just opened in Canada, but, it took 4 years, and you just get the impression that, they're opening one of those in China every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and they're even opening them in small towns, like small centers, because there's so much expertise around in China these days that it's formidable, the competition from China. But on the other hand, you have to look at it this way, that it's a good thing for the planet, because I don't know where we would be without the innovation in China right now. California has just approved the largest solar farm in the U.S., enough to power 9 million homes.
Wow.
So that's the Valley Clean Energy Infrastructure Plan, will span 4 times the size of San Francisco across the San Joaquin Valley. 20 gigawatts of solar paired with 20 gigawatts of battery storage on fallowed farmland. It is expected to be fully complete, and this is the interesting thing, not until the late 2030s.
That's so too long.
Not even nuclear would be completed by that. High-speed rail in California might even be completed before that. It's not often that you see a solar farm announced that would take more than a decade. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what the nuances of that. We have people listening in California. Maybe you guys know. Maybe it's about land acquisition. Maybe it's about, we don't need that much power right now. This is for future development, and we're just going to plan it. And it's time for a CES Fast Fact. Official data reports that 12% of China's electric vehicles on the road now are EVs. So 12% of the vehicles on the road. We talk about that. We talk about the percentage of new car sales that are electric. Well, after a while, you start to see a good portion of the cars on the road being electric. And guess what? Fossil fuel sales, that is the sales of gasoline and diesel for road transportation, fell 5.7% because of that last year. So that's a good thing. We don't want to burn fossil fuels, and we want to see that pace accelerate. This is another CES Fast Fact. A 1% drop in oil supply leads to 10% increase in the oil price. Why is that important to what we talk about? Because we are talking about just that, displacing oil supply. So if we displace that, then the price goes down maybe 10% too, and 20% reduction of world supply is what's happening in the state of Hormuz right now. So that's why oil prices shot up. But the reverse can happen too. If you displace that and there's a glut, the price drops, and then the oil fantasy falls apart. Post-fire inspection of a BYD Seal, that is a small SUV, I think, reveals the structural integrity of the CTB chassis of that vehicle. This is in China, and the LFP battery pack. And by the way, the battery packs in the Blade batteries are LFP. They're lithium iron phosphate. This is the Blade 1 pack that we talked about that's now being displaced. So it's not because the car set on fire, though. It was caused by a lithium battery fire, but it was one of those little portable chargers,
right,
sitting on the passenger seat. It ignited and set the car on fire, and the battery was fine. The whole car burnt to the ground, and the battery was not affected.
Wow.
The structure of the battery pack, and I think it's like 600 degrees Celsius or something that these things can get up to without thermal runaway. That's a big deal, because people, maybe it's irrational, it is irrational, but people are worried about battery fires too. If they're going to buy an EV, especially because they've heard misinformation. It's actually 20 times more likely that your gas car will set on fire. Happens every day. It's probably happening right now as we record this in my neighborhood. Somewhere around here, there's a truck or something on fire. The latest victim of the Middle East conflict is Bangladesh. The government will cut deliveries to petrol pumps and shut down fertilizer plants to conserve gas. That's from Bloomberg. So Bangladesh, if you're driving EVs, you're laughing right now. And, if you're laughing if you're in North America and driving by the gas pump and not give a damn because your fuel price is what it is, and it's cheap. It's charging at home. The health cost of polluted air in Alberta, Canada, $12.9 billion per year Canadian, from the Pembina Institute, which studies these things. A Canadian study suggests solar farms could increase global crop yields by hundreds of billions of pounds UK currency, thanks to the protective microclimate created beneath the panels. So that is a big deal. Crop yields could go up for certain crops if they are mixed with solar panels. The governor of Michigan is calling for a probe into why the National Weather Service in the United States did not issue a tornado watch in southwest Michigan before a deadly tornado tore through in early March. Yes, a tornado, deadly in early March in Michigan, the northern United States.
That's not the normal tornado season, is it?
I don't think so, Brian, but who knows? Maybe there isn't a season anymore. 4 deaths and a dozen injured there. China's annual EV production exceeded 16 million vehicles last year, while the number of charging facilities nationwide surpassed 20 million.
Wow.
We'll hear more on that later. As a result of China's rapid installation of wind, water, and solar, China can reach 100% wind, water, and solar energy across all energy sectors by 2051 if it continues installing at the rate that it's currently doing and electrifies all energy. We expect that rate to go up for all the reasons we talk about on the show, the decrease of prices, improvement of technology. But here's the thing, the US and India at the rate they're going, 100 years later than that. 2151 at the rates they're going. But India is just getting going, and I'm hopeful that they will speed up. I'm not so hopeful for the United States. I think, solar and wind is still pretty strong in the United States last year, in spite of the administration working against them. So we'll see where economics take that and the trajectories. According to the Chinese export data compiled by Ember Research in the 12 months to April 2025, Cuba's imports of Chinese solar panels grew by a factor of 34. Incredible. Faster than anywhere else in the world. Cuba may experience the fastest energy transition in the world as a result. And that is because, embargoes of oil. And what does it do, Trump? It helps renewables. We'll see if it saves Cuba because they're in a terrible, there's no garbage pickup in Cuba. Piles of garbage are in the streets, like it's completely falling apart. But you have to realize the importance and the benefit of independence, energy independence with renewables. And finally this week, Wang Shengfu, the president of BY, gave an address on the second generation of Blade batteries. And Brian, I got AI to dub a portion of it into English.
Okay.
Because I was reading the subtitles, but I wanted to share a portion of it with our listeners. So I'm going to play that, but I'm going to have us say goodbye to everyone first, and we'll clip that onto the end of the show.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. You can find us on social media at Clean Energy Pod. That Patreon is patreon.com/cleanenergypod. The email is cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And of course, please hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you are listening to this podcast, and you'll get new episodes every week.
Thank you to our Patreon Clean Club executive members who are giving at the highest level. They get a shout out every week. Green Bastard, Brent Routley, and Tiernan. Thank you all who are supporting our podcast, even if you're just listening to it. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.
Let me share some figures with you all. China currently has 320 million gasoline-powered vehicles, and for those, there are over 100,000 gas stations. Now, what about new energy vehicles? There are approximately 45 million of them on the road. Can you all take a guess at how many public charging stations there are to support them? There are 300,000 of them. That's 3 times the number of gas stations. But even now, people are still saying it's not enough, and they're desperately trying to build even more. This is also due to low charging efficiency, which leads to a massive waste of valuable copper resources. Why do I say that? Let me break down the numbers for you. When you install a 150 kilowatt charging station, the power grid equips you with 150 kilowatt copper cables or a transformer. This means that around the clock, 24 hours a day, it can charge 3,600 kilowatt hours of electricity. However, at present, a single public charging connector can only serve an average of 5 vehicles per day. If we calculate based on each individual vehicle charging 40 kilowatt hours of electricity, the actual amount that can be delivered is only a little over 200 kilowatt hours in total. When you do the math, the power utilization rate for public charging stations is a mere 5.6%. This means that over 90% of the available power is not being utilized at all, resulting in these already worn out copper wires or transformers sitting completely idle. What's more, to ease their growing anxiety, every single household is now installing their own private home charging stations, and they're all charging their electric vehicles right there at home. Now, consider gasoline vehicles. For over a century, they've simply gone to gas stations to fill up, completely free from this kind of hassle and worry. If we were able to make the charging speed for electric vehicles as quick as filling up a gas tank, then why couldn't electric vehicles simply return to the refueling approach of traditional gasoline cars? They could just head to a public charging station to power up, without the absolute necessity of installing a home charging unit. Earlier, we discussed the numerous anxieties faced by electric vehicle owners, which have undeniably placed a considerable mental burden upon them. To address this anxiety, by making larger batteries, installing charging piles at home, and constructing more public charging stations. All these efforts are merely treating the symptoms, not truly tackling the underlying problem. And they've also resulted in a massive waste of our societal resources. What's more, we still haven't managed to completely alleviate these concerns. We firmly believe that to effectively solve any problem, you must address its fundamental root cause. The true underlying issue here is slow charging speeds, or the significant challenge of charging in low temperatures. To fundamentally resolve these critical issues from their very source, the battery itself is the absolutely crucial factor. Today, after 6 long years of dedicated research and development, we are incredibly proud to present a truly groundbreaking innovation in power batteries, BYD's second generation Blade battery.